In the year 1720, on the ivory coast of Africa, the ocean was more than water. It was a road of trade, a wall of protection, and a spirit that carried the names of warriors across the world. Among the Ashanti people lived a young warrior named Diego Grillo. He was the son of a powerful chief, raised beneath the sun, trained with spear, blade, and discipline, and taught that a leader must serve before he can lead. Diego was only in his early 20s, but he carried himself like a man chosen by history. Beside him stood his brother, Sekou, fierce, loyal, fearless. Together, they worked near the coast, overseeing the building of strong wooden ships. Their hands knew carved timber, their eyes knew sails, their minds understood the sea. They dressed as warriors of their land, wrapped in traditional African clothing, with leather, woven cloth, beads, bronze, and bone marking their status. They were not kings yet, but anyone who saw them knew they were sons of power. Their father's people traded gold with the Portuguese. For a time, that trade brought wealth, metal, weapons, cloth, and foreign goods. But trade brings strangers, and strangers often bring hunger for more. One late afternoon, beneath an amber sky, Diego's father sat with his council. Across from them stood a Portuguese minister, surrounded by armed men and pride. Formal words turned sharp. The Ashanti chieftain accused the Portuguese of disrespecting his lands, cheating farmers, and acting as though they owned what they had only been allowed to touch. The minister answered with arrogance. Voices rose. Hands struck tables. Warriors reached for weapons. Then the chieftain stood and commanded the Portuguese to leave his lands at once. But Diego and Sekou knew nothing of the storm behind them. They were on the shore in a small fishing boat, their warrior clothing catching the salt wind as they cast nets. The harbor seemed calm. The waves were low. The sun was sinking. Then the Portuguese came. A large ship moved into the harbor like a shadow. Armed men rowed toward the boats. Diego saw the danger first. Sekou grabbed the oar like a weapon. They fought with everything they had, striking, pushing, shouting, refusing to move. But the Portuguese came in numbers. Nets, chains, and blades surrounded them. Diego and Sekou were beaten, bound, and dragged from their boat. Their wrists were locked in iron. Their ankles were chained. The sons of a chieftain were taken like stolen treasure. That night, they were forced aboard a massive ship. Behind them, the Ivory Coast faded into darkness. Ahead waited Santo Domingo. The voyage was cruel. The sea that had been their teacher became their prison. Diego listened to creaking wood, snapping ropes, and Portuguese voices above deck. He memorized how the ship moved, how sailors tied knots, how commands were given. Even in chains, his mind stayed free. Sekou, wounded but unbroken, whispered that they would return home. Diego promised they would not only return, they would return with power. When they reached Santo Domingo, the brothers were sold to a plantation owner. Their warrior clothing was stripped away. They were forced into rough, traditional Caribbean slavery clothing, simple cloth beneath the punishing sun. They were sent into cotton and tobacco fields, where work was endless and the air was thick with dust, sweat, and sorrow. For 6 months, Diego and Sekou labored. They bent their backs, carried loads, cut stalks, and watched armed guards patrol. But every day, Diego studied. He watched roads, counted guards, learned when wagons came, when sailors drank, when ships arrived, and when docks grew quiet. Sekou saw the plan in his brother's eyes before Diego spoke it. One night, under a moon hidden by clouds, Diego told him the truth. They would escape Santo Domingo by taking a ship from the dock, not stealing a boat, not hiding in cargo. Taking a ship, the plan was dangerous, but Diego understood ships. He had built them on the Ivory Coast and studied them during the crossing. He knew how a deck worked, how sails caught wind, and how fear could become a weapon. The brothers found clothing that let them pass as deckhands, rough shirts, trousers, belts, and cloth head wraps. They moved through darkness toward the harbor, while the captain of a merchant vessel was away gathering supplies. Diego and Sekou slipped aboard, their hearts hammered like war drums. A few men remained on deck, but the brothers moved fast. Sekou struck first. Diego took the lead. Ropes were cut, sails dropped. The ship rose. By the time shouts rose from the harbor, the vessel was turning toward open water. Santo Domingo disappeared behind them. For the first time in months, the brothers were not chained. They were at sea, and the sea remembered them. In the weeks that followed, Diego Grillo and Sekou transformed. They were no longer captives. They became hunters of the waves. They dressed in traditional pirate wardrobe with long coats, sashes, boots, blades, and pirate hats that made them feared from deck to deck. But beneath the pirate clothing, they remained Ashanti warriors. They captured small ships first, taking food, tools, rum, weapons, and materials. Then they grew bolder, striking merchant vessels through the Caribbean. They took gold from the greedy, seized supplies from the powerful, freed those they could, and punished those who trafficked in chains. Stories spread quickly. Sailors whispered of two African brothers who fought like storms and vanished like smoke. Some called them pirates, others called them avengers. To the Portuguese, they became a nightmare. Diego commanded with intelligence. Sekou led boarding attacks with fearless strength. Together, they built a crew from the desperate, the escaped, the betrayed, and the brave. Their ship became a floating rebellion, its sails cutting across the Caribbean like dark wings. Gold, rum, ivory, timber, weapons, and ship materials passed through their hands. But Diego did not hoard victory. He remembered the Ivory Coast, his father, and the harbor where he and Sekou had been stolen. So he sent wealth and materials back across the sea. Gold returned to Africa. Ivory returned to African hands. Timber, metal, and supplies reached the Ivory Coast, strengthening the people the Portuguese had tried to weaken. Then Diego made his boldest decision. He would not simply escape the Portuguese. He would break their power on the water. The Portuguese fleet moved through the Caribbean with confidence, believing cannons and flags made them untouchable.